So today we are going to talk about data discovery, and I hope everyone can see my slides. Today on the webinar, together with me, we will have Marijan Bračić, who is the head of research in Data Privacy Manager. She is an expert in linguistics and AI, and she is going to speak about technical challenges of data discovery and classification and how to overcome them. So Ana Maria, welcome.
Thank you very much, Marijan. Welcome everyone to our webinar. I hope you will enjoy it. Sit back, relax, and let's have a very successful webinar together.
Thank you very much. And myself, I am the product owner of Data Privacy Manager, and my background is mostly in data management and data protection. So as far as the agenda goes, today we are going to talk about the challenges of data discovery and classification and why it is important for data protection. We are also going to talk about how Data Privacy Manager can solve these challenges, and in the end we are going to have a Q&A session and a very, very short poll. So one of the things we can start with is the data discovery software and what it does. So data discovery software is what we do at Data Privacy Manager, and it is designed to automate the aspect of data protection usually called the data mapping or building your data inventory. Forrester defines data discovery and classification as the capability to provide visibility into where sensitive data is located, identify what this sensitive data is and why it is considered sensitive, and tag or label this data based on its level of sensitivity. So before explaining what we do and how we do it, I think it is very well worth your while to think about the challenges. And when I thought about, how to present the challenges that we can solve with data discovery and classification, I thought about a couple of questions. So first thing I'm going to do is guide you through this thought process. And the questions are kind of basic, but difficult to answer. And the first one may well be, is there anyone in your company who knows where all the personal data are stored and used, of course? And I believe the answer to that is pretty obvious. There is not one single person in the company who knows this, especially if you process large volumes of data, if you have complex IT environments, if you have different departments and division of responsibility. And the question is basic, but when you think about it, this of course shouldn't be one person in the company. You should have a system. You should have the capability to easily find information about all personal data that are being stored and used in your company. And on the right side of the screen, I have listed GDPR principles. And these principles are the guidelines into compliance, or let's say minimization of risks in the area of data protection. As you know, every DPO knows, as anyone in the privacy operations knows, accountability is one of those principles, very, very important. And how can you be accountable as a company if you don't know all your data? So I think this is one of the things you can think about when trying to understand how data discovery and classification software can help. The other one is, how many times do you copy the same data? This one may be not so obvious, But in terms of privacy principles, there are three that I have highlighted here. Data minimization is where you have to make sure that you are not collecting too many data, that you are, not overweight as a company in terms of data collection. And duplication of data happens every day, and you can think about your customers, prospects, employees, partners, contact data. You can think about employment data and financial data, health data, maybe. I know that, for example, banks sometimes get very, very much data, different types of data. And when customers, for example, want to make sure that they are going to get some specific service or a product, or they are just asking questions, they sometimes send too many data. For example, they can send their health records even. I have really seen that happen. So you want to make sure that you are minimizing the data. You want to make sure that you are using the data for the correct purpose. And you want to make sure that the storage limitation principle is also satisfied in terms that you need to delete data or anonymize data from time to time. And we will talk about that a little bit later. The third question is, can you know if a new type of personal data has been collected? And most probably you don't know that immediately. But you definitely should know that, and accountability principle again applies here, but also lawfulness, fairness, and transparency principle. So if you want to make sure that you are processing personal data lawfully, you need to be aware if a new type of data is being collected. And you can have new types of forms on your website. Marketing can start a new campaign collecting new types of data. Even customers or people themselves can send you data which you have not requested in any way. So you want to make sure that at all times you have this information available. Another one is, do you store any special category personal data in a data store with no access monitoring? So think about the security part here. We have seen big incidents like data breaches. I think even a year and a half ago, there was a breach on Google Cloud where 1.2 or 1.5 billion users were exposed. And in these servers, unprotected, there was information about telephone number, name, email address, and then combined profiles from Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and GitHub. So data was scraped by some company and then offered to the bidders, and data scientists can start playing with the data, can start copying data sets in different places. So you want to make sure that your sensitive data is protected at all times. But this is a difficult question to pose to your system. And the final one, I'm going to end this part of the webinar with this question is, can you know all the countries where your data is now hosted and archived? So if you think about cross-border data transfers and different states with different rules and different countries with different data protection regulation and rules, you also need to be aware where your data is going. So in our case, we have seen with customers that they use a lot of marketing systems hosted in the United States, and you all probably know the situation currently with data transfers between European Union and United States. And then we have seen all these different combinations of countries, depending on where your vendors and systems are hosted, your data might be scattered all around the world. So this is very, very important to know. All right, so this was kind of a short introduction in the topic. And now I'm going to hand over to Ana Maria Petric, who is going to talk about technical challenges, how we can deal with structured data, unstructured data, with languages and scripts. And Ana Maria, the floor is yours. You are going to be that person on the webinar who says, Marijan, next slide, please.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Marijan. Okay, so let us just begin with the foundation of every business activity, right? So every business that you do, every business activity that you want to develop or maintain begins and ends with data. The dataverse, which we use as a kind of a term to cover all of the data landscape in a company, comprises and has several different problems, right, that need to be addressed when you want to discover personal data. The first and maybe the largest one is the amount of data or the volume of data that is generated across the globe on a daily basis. So conservative estimates benchmark this at 7.56 billion gigabytes of data. For those of you who are interested, that's like 7.5 and then 20 zeros behind it. So it's a large amount of data, but it's not just about the amount of data that is generated, right? It's also about the visibility of data. And this is a very important concept to understand, because the data that we collect and the data that we process, some of that we know that we collect and process. The other one, we don't know. We call this data dark data, and it comprises in the world about 6.75 gigabytes of data every day go dark. And this data is obviously something that poses both an opportunity, so a business opportunity if you know that you have some information in this dark data, but it also poses a significant security risk, because inside of this silos of data, you can have data that is actually personal and needs to be protected, and it needs to be properly handled. And lastly, there is an increasing amount of regulatory complexity across the globe. Marijan has touched upon this when he talked about the transfer of data between the EU and the US. However, what I want to draw your attention to is the large number of privacy and the strength of privacy-related acts. So most of the people are aware of the GDPR and its effects on the personal data in Europe. However, we see an increasing number of similar regulations across the globe. So to name a few, there is a CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act, LGPD in Brazil, and recently even China has implemented a privacy law, which is called Data Security Law, which also brings China closer to the personal data protection. So this kind of gives you a backdrop of what happens with the data in an enterprise and why tools that enable the discovery of personal data are really, really important in the global market. So what we aim to do with the data discovery is to enable the enterprise to minimize both the regulatory risk and at the same time to increase the trust of their customers and the trust of even the regulatory space within a specific country in this particular enterprise. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide, where we will kind of try to conceptualize what is in the dataverse, right? So we can separate the data collected by the company in structured and unstructured data. Structured data is the data that most of you probably know. These are all your Excel sheets or your CSV files or your relational databases, all the data that you use for your marketing, that's structured, that you know where it is and how to access it in most cases. What is important for structured data from a technical point of view is that this data is made in such a way that it's easy for the machine to understand. So when we talk about the data that is structured, it means that it's structured both for the human, right, and for the machine as well. So a table is interpretable in most cases by both the human person as well as the machine as on the other side. So unstructured data, on the other hand, is a much more complex issue. We use unstructured data to communicate with each other. At the moment, I'm using a form of unstructured data to speak to all of you. It's very hard for a machine to parse this. It's very hard for a machine to understand what's being conveyed, what is the data package that is being conveyed between me and you as listeners. And when we talk about the enterprise, right, inside of the enterprise, the amount of unstructured data is really large. When you think about this is all of your contracts with your with your customers, with your employees. This is all the emails you send to each other, all the Slack messages, all the meeting notes, all of the employee records, videos, photos you take for the promotion of your activities, everything, and all your social media messages, everything that you use to communicate with your customers and within your enterprise is actually mostly unstructured data. And this data is usually a nightmare for enterprises because it can propagate a lot of the privacy risks across the globe. It is not unheard of that an employee sitting in one office will send a quick message about a customer to an employee sitting in another office. And at that point, you have created a point of contention because the private data of a customer, so for example, me, has been propagated inside of your email server. So this is really a complex and very difficult and very diverse and heterogeneous issue that we are talking about here. All right, so just to give you kind of the idea of how this process goes from an enterprise point of view, is that the first and the most important thing is to know that you have the data. It seems trivial, but from our experience with some customers, we have realized that customers do not always know that they have this data. And I can refer back to the example I just gave you between your employees talking about a customer. You do not necessarily know as an enterprise that this data has been shared between, I don't know, on a Slack message, whatever. Then you have to identify who has access to it. So who in your enterprise can access this particular information? Then you need to determine, okay, who is the person that uses this data? Is this your marketing department? Is this your finance department? Who is this department or a person that uses this data, and for what purpose are they using it? Then you need to track it. So the data is not stationary. The data moves across your systems, right? Sometimes you duplicate it, sometimes you will accidentally delete it, but the data is not a stationary thing. It changes through time. And you need to be able to track these changes across your systems, across your different business processes, both to protect it and also to facilitate the usage of data for some kind of a business opportunity. Then you need to define how do you manage it, all right? So you have to manage your data in some way. Do you manage it whether from a privacy perspective or from a business opportunity perspective? And lastly, if this is private data, given the regulatory acts that apply to you, you need to either protect it and or expand it once the consents are withdrawn, because obviously the consumers, at least in the European Union, have the right to be forgotten once their business purpose has been expired. So yeah, how do we actually identify all of the data that is propagated in the system? So Marijan, if you would like to move to the next slide. I want to touch upon a concept that me as a linguist am quite familiar with, and I'm not going to bore you with the details of it, but this process is called named entity recognition. It's a well-documented process of extracting and identifying named entities such as person, location, organization, even a medicinal drug, specific time, clinical procedure, biological protein in text and tables. So what this allows us to do is leverage the language capabilities and the machine capabilities of understanding language to extract private or sensitive data. And this is particularly important because I want to reiterate that the privacy laws do not apply just on the data that you know you have. They apply in the equal measure to all of the data that you don't know that you have. So this means that there is no way for you to argue, oh, I didn't know that I'm collecting this particular piece of data, so I'm not going to be fined. That there is no such justification. And this means subsequently that all of the tables, all of the emails, PDFs, transcriptions of phone calls, complaints, social media correspondences, etc., needs to be handled by a company. You need to be able to give an informed response about all of the data in your landscape that is private, sensitive, and show that you have protected it and that you have applied measures that have been imposed by the regulatory action. This is, as you can imagine, if you think about your own companies and your daily tasks, you can immediately see that this is very time consuming and it's difficult, right? You're talking about all kinds of different documents, all kinds of different tables. You're talking about all kinds of different formats. So it's very difficult. It's not something that you can just be done with in like half an hour if you're doing it by hand. And a lot of people are still doing it by hand. So it's not that there are not solutions out there that can help you, but they are usually not powerful enough or not specific enough. Because what the data discovery does is it's really geared toward a sensitive and personal data protection. So it does identify these entities much better than some of the out-of-the-box solutions out there. And I'm gonna talk briefly about it in our next slide. So let's talk about the structured data. So as we know, these are the data that I already said at the beginning, that the enterprise usually has some idea of what's in the tables, right? It would be ludicrous if you didn't know at least roughly what's in your tables. However, so a lot of people might think like, okay, this data, I got it covered, right? My business process has this covered. But we do not take into account one very, very important thing, and that's that people are awful at consistency. You will have in your landscape, and you can verify this if you go into your own relational databases, you will have all kinds of different ways to refer to the same thing. So in one table, you might call your customer name, and it can contain a name and a surname, or just the first name. You can have something called name and surname. You can have name, surname in all in capital letters, in lowercase letters. You can have any combination thereof. And not to mention that you can also have shorthand columns that you maybe know what they refer to. So for example, you can have name, surname, customer, or you can have NS_C, right, to refer to this particular entity. Or you can decide, for whatever reason, to call your column alpha. And this alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, might contain personal data or it might not. But there is no way to tell just from the name of the column itself, right? And what this inconsistency does, right, it makes it difficult to use rules to identify personal data. It becomes really cumbersome. It becomes really difficult. These rules become so bloated because every time some of your employees decide to call customer surname and name instead of customer, you need to create a new rule. And this propagates to the systems, and you get a really bloated rule-based system that you no longer can maintain. The other thing is that things change through time, right? So for example, the column for my energy provider changed in the contact area, that now you can just give people your email. So you can get all your correspondences with the email, whereas like a year ago, it was just necessarily your physical address. You have two entities in this contact column. And this has been something that has been happening more and more because of the pandemic, right? So a lot of the businesses rapidly went digital. So that means that they did not necessarily have a consolidated policy on how to fill their existing tables, because they obviously want to keep as much as possible the same reporting strategy that they had before. So my provider now has email and a physical address in one column, whereas a year ago, it was just a physical address. And lastly, people can also decide to split the column, right? So you can have something called address_other_1, where you will have the name of the street. Then you have a house number, city, zip code, province, and state, where you have basically one address that has been split across I think, 6 columns in this particular case. So this becomes obviously a very complex issue to address. All right. So how do we actually tackle this? So when we visualize and conceptualize the data discovery for structured data, we wanted to build something more intelligent than just a rule-based, right? We wanted to build a machine learning model that can handle a very complex enterprise landscape. And to this end, our initial goal was to simulate the real world and the table connections. So to this end, we first built our own relational models so that we don't actually just handle one column or one table, but we actually handle the entirety of a landscape. This allowed us to test our models and their performance on various types of tables. Not all of the tables in your enterprise are the same, all right? Some of them can be primary, some can have different keys. You can have a very complex landscape in your tables. And lastly, the reason why we built this is that we didn't want to be a small-scale software, small-scale program, right? We wanted to be able to actually extract correctly and accurately personal data from large databases, all right? So we didn't want to limit ourselves to just a specific subset of tables that you might have a hunch you might have personal data in. So there is also a lot of transaction tables that might or might not have personal data, you don't know. And we obviously didn't want to be one of those people who use machine learning for any and every purpose. We have actually kept some of the rule-based systems in place, and we use them to enhance the machine learning models. So you get a very interesting combination of rule-based and machine learning that kind of gives you the best overview that you can have over your data landscape. So what does the data discovery allow you to do? Okay, so our data discovery, first and foremost, allows you to identify a large number of personal data types. So it's not just that we can identify persons or geolocations or national identification numbers or passport numbers, but we can also identify addresses, emails, phone numbers, all kinds of different data, organizations in your data. Another very interesting feature that we developed to address the issue of changing through time columns is the multi-label classification. What do I mean by that? So imagine that you have a customer database, customer table, and your customers obviously could be natural persons or it could be businesses, other businesses, right? So what we can do is take this column that is called customer from this particular table and tell you, okay, in this particular column, you have person and you have organization. And we can obviously allow you to handle this column appropriately based on the information that you have about the entities that we have found in the column. For the contact column, for example, hypothetical contact column, we can return that you have phone numbers, you can have email, you can even have WeChat, or you can have, for example, physical address. And another thing is that through our interface, right, you can track how your data changes through time. So if you do a scan and you identify specific types of personal data in a column, and you decide that someone has erroneously filled up the column with some data that you don't want to have in that particular column, or you want to expand from that particular column or shift or move to another, you can track that this has been properly addressed when the next scan is started, as the label will change, but you will have a historical record of what was contained in the column prior. And this, I would want to wrap up that this allows you a complete overview of your structured data landscape. However, this is just half of the story. And I would say a much more comprehensible side of the story. The second side of the story is the unstructured data discovery. So what is the prerequisite to be able to do the unstructured data discovery? Here on the right-hand side, you can see something that might be unintelligible to you. But this is actually how all of the machine learning models are actually taught. This is called a corpus. And what we do here is we give our model a large, really a large amount of sentences where we expose the model, expose it to a large amount of different words and contexts, etc. And what we do then, when we have collected these sentences, we label, we label specific entities of interest. So you can see now in the red box that there is something called B/geo. So what this does, it tells our model London is a geopolitical entity, same as Iraq, but British is also a geopolitical entity. It's a NORP, right? So you can have all kinds of different labels that tell you different kinds of information about what is this entity. And what it does, it doesn't just teach you that London is a geopolitical entity. What it does, it looks at the context, right? And it allows you to extrapolate in the future for unseen words what this particular entity might be. So the model might have never seen Zagreb or Skopje or Ljubljana, but it will be able to conclude that the probability is much larger that this is a geopolitical entity than a personal name. Although London can also be a personal name, and it is able to leverage context to do this. And most of the out-of-the-box models are trained on billions of records. However, for our purposes, they are not good enough because they don't focus specifically on the data that is personal. And what we did is we created our own corpus, right, which is focused specifically on identifying and leveraging the power of machine learning to identify personal data, and personal data, specifically personal data in context. All right, so our niche area is obviously PII. Our corpus is made by ourselves, and the net that we employ is really advanced. And I'm gonna walk you through an example of an email first. So you can see here, this is a typical email that you might receive from your customer or your employee, where you are writing about somebody changing their address. So you want to change these details in your database. But to communicate that to your colleague, you need to write an email or you need to call, whatever. And what our model does, you can see here under in green, you can see that dear Alan, the model has recognized that Alan is a person, and it has a confidence of 0.98 or 98%. And the model is sure that this is a person. The same way, it is sure that John McWilliams is a person, right? So you can see I'm writing you an email regarding the change of details for customer John McWilliams. And then we have 324 Rochester Ave, Miami, Florida, 331000. And what it does, it tells you in this sentence, we have a person, John McWilliams, but we also have an address. And the model is 97% sure that this sequence of words is an address. And then it ignores, right? So you can see the sentence under it, which is the customer reached to us to inform us that his phone line has been disconnected, and therefore we need to remove it. There is no phone number here. What the model does is says, okay, this particular sentence does not contain any personal data. So it just skips it. It doesn't want to do anything with it. And interestingly, when I talk about the advanced NER and the context that we leverage to understand what the entities are, is basically recently I have given a lecture at the University of Thomas More in Belgium. And I showed them in our demo one example that they were really shocked by. And that's why I showed them a sentence, which is Thomas More is a famous philosopher. And then today I'm giving a lecture at Thomas More, right? So if this was a rule-based system, we could assign that Thomas More is a person. We could say like, okay, you have this construction, this is a person. But our model takes the words around it and extrapolates the value of the Thomas More based on the context of the sentence. So in the first sentence, Thomas More is a famous philosopher. It will tell you that Thomas More is a person. right? And in the second case, today I'm giving a lecture at Thomas More. It will tell you that Thomas More is an organization. And this is something that our model does really, really well. So it's able to, it can disambiguate between different usages of the same word. And this, I think, is one of the things that makes it really, really fun to use and really, really fun to see. All right, so one last thing that I want to touch upon is the fact that you have a certain issue, right? Most of these nerve systems that you have outside, out of the box are built for large languages, obviously large markets, large languages. But what we here in data discovery team believe is that there is a reason to propagate the democratization of access to compliance, right? So small languages should have the same access to compliance as the big languages. There is no reason why somebody in Croatia would have a harder time using these tools than somebody in England, right? And what we built into our software is the language agnosticism and script agnosticism. And we don't want to send the data outside of your system. So we want to just keep it all in-house. And I'm going to show you one use case about this, which is a personal data discovery and classification in Macedonian and English. So let's just look at the English examples. I selected some column names. So you have name, surname, parent name, and date of birth. And then we can see that there is a Macedonian Cyrillic version of that. And I do apologize if there are some Macedonians for butchering the pronunciation, because I do not speak Macedonian myself. So you have ime, prezime, ime na roditelj, data na rađanje. And lastly, you can have also the same Macedonian language in a Latinized form, because the requirements of the database might require you to have that. And you can basically, with our data discovery, classify these columns regardless of language. So you can have just English columns or just English tables, Macedonian tables, or any combination thereof. So you can literally have one column have an English name and the other column have a Macedonian name. So this is one of the features that I really strongly believe is necessary, and we should have equal opportunity to comply with the regulations regardless of the location or the language or the script that we use. All right, so I'm going to wrap up because I've been talking quite a bit. So DPM data discovery starts with the source connection, scans of system, language identification and classification, allowing us to connect to your database, scan your system, identify which language is present in which column, and then classify it accordingly. All right, so to give me a bit of a break, I would like to hand it over to Marijan, who's briefly going to walk you through the data inventory and privacy 360.
All right, thank you very much. So the second step that you see here in this process is the DPM data inventory. So data inventory is one of the modules of Data Privacy Manager, and what it does for you is that you can publish the data discovery results into the data inventory. So you have a searchable database of information of where your personal data is all across your systems. Then it combines this information with any other privacy related information in Data Privacy Manager. So I'm going to explain later that Data Privacy Manager as a modular software has different kinds of capabilities and can keep different kinds of data. So the more data you have about your systems, the more data you have about their hosting location and who is the owner of specific system and so on. It gives you more information about your data. So who is using it, who is in charge of it, where it's hosted, and so on. So this gives you also the ability to identify privacy risks. So the questions I mentioned in the beginning, which are pretty basic, but very difficult to answer, this is the job of the data inventory. So data inventory will allow you to get answers to the questions I asked in the beginning. So Anna Maria, do you want to wrap this slide up?
Yeah, I just want to mention something that we have already developed in Data Privacy Manager, and we are currently planning to onboard the data discovery into this process, and that's a concept of Privacy 360, which is something that allows us to disambiguate different entities in all of your sources and link them so that you as a person, for example, your customer, you have in one place all of the data in your structured and unstructured sources that belong to this particular customer, and you can obviously easily handle the withdrawal of consent or any other marketing or business opportunity that you want to leverage with this particular customer.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can carry on, Marijan. So.
Okay, so thank you very much for the technical challenges. I think this was very interesting, and it always is when it comes from someone who is working on that and who is designing the solutions to those challenges. And I have to say, in Data Privacy Manager, we are very happy to have such a capable team that Ana Maria is leading, and our technology is good because we have a great team. So to end this webinar, let me just quickly guide you through the Data Privacy Manager, which is a modular privacy management platform. It has different modules which are designed to solve different types of challenges. What we talked about today regarding data discovery and classification is what we call data discovery and data inventory. It's one of the products within our platform. There are others. We can tackle data processing inventory, records of processing activities and risks, and managing consents and preferences and data subject request fulfillment, and third-party management. And also one of the big problems besides data discovery and classification, which is data retention schedule and automation of data removal. So this deserves another webinar, and we are planning to do it very quickly. All right, so one more thing, as we are discovering our proprietary technology, we do continue to keep on delivering new capabilities with Data Privacy Manager. I have highlighted just a couple of them, which I like to talk about. We have released our data discovery, our new data discovery powered by machine learning this quarter. So it's being implemented in a lot of places as we speak. And next quarter, we are releasing the data discovery for unstructured data with connectors to, Microsoft 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, and so on. In Q3, we are releasing a new module for automation of data removal, and also starting to use our own proprietary technology called Data Vault, which is the ultra-fast search of encrypted data. And in Q4 of this year, we are going to release the new preference management portal for consents and preference management. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was interesting. I hope you did learn something new. I think Ana Maria's presentation was very, very good. Even I learned something new. So one of the questions is, what are the efforts expected from clients during the data discovery implementation period? So I think in the beginning, there is some work to be done on the technical side in terms of, tracking all the systems in terms of infrastructure of the databases and file share locations and so on that we need to list in the beginning to start connecting to. And then what we usually do is we hand over the results of the first initial data discoveries for all the systems to customers to verify, with our help, of course. So, I mean, once the system starts working, it's fully automated. there is not a lot of work on the customer side, but in the beginning, of course, we need some involvement. And the typical duration of the project is somewhere between 1 month to 3 months, depending, of course, on the complexity and number of systems and any specific things that we might encounter with you. All right, any other questions? Let me check. Okay, so we have a question. Will you going to provide a copy of the presentation? I think yes, the presentation is going to be available to all the participants. We'll definitely make sure that it is.
Yeah, I can see that Niyant Singh, I apologize if I pronounce your name incorrectly, has asked how does the data discovery handle different regulatory aspects of what is personal data. So our models are designed in such a way that we can always identify, for example, the IP address in your data. We can tell you that you collected, and you have the option to manually say and override these results and say, okay, this is not personal data in my particular region. However, what is the next step for data discovery is obviously tying in what is being discovered with different regulations. However, because of the Europe, I think in 2016, in a court case in Germany, has decided that in some cases, IP address is personal data. So it's personal data in context. It's a different type of personal data. What we feel is better that you know that you have it, just in case that you need to protect it and handle it. Then you don't know that you have it based on the premise that you might think that it's not personal data. So what we want is to have the full information about everything that can be considered personal data in different regulatory landscapes. I hope that gives you a bit of a perspective on how we handle this.
And Anna Maria, we have, I think, 2 more questions for you.
Oh,
yeah. The first question is, Anna Maria, in your personal opinion, what is the coolest thing about data discovery?
That is a question that I could give a personal webinar on, but what I think the coolest thing about the data discovery is that its ability to just both handle and inform you about what you're doing. But for me, as somebody who has been involved in designing it, for me, the coolest thing is that all of the data, you have from your customers. Our customers will sometimes send us their own assessments of what data they're processing. And when you compare that with the results of the data discovery, you can see that in some cases, the company knew that it had certain personal data, and we discovered the same personal data across different and other systems that they did not know that they were collecting the personal data in. And I think that's really cool, because it feels to me as a designer of the system that we have actually literally made a difference. And I think that's the coolest thing, when you can actually see that your customers are pleased and they learn something new, and then you from your customers obviously learn new things, and you learn a lot about the landscape, and you can design your models even better.
Okay, and would you like to take the one that says what makes Data Privacy Manager data discovery different than other similar solutions?
So yeah, I can answer it, and you can jump in if you feel I'm missing out on something. What I think is the primary difference between similar solutions and Data Privacy Manager is that we have actually really spent a lot of time to design, to ensure that we have data, right? And private data is not easy to come by. We had to expend a large amount of time and effort to create this landscape, this ecological system of data in an enterprise, to teach our models not to identify anything or whatever, but just to be a laser focus on identifying personal data and taking into account the context, not just the context in normal sentences, but also the context in the table itself, which is something that I feel was really, really innovative, because we take the context in structured data as well, and we take the context in unstructured data as well. And naturally, one of the things that I feel sets us apart is that everything, right? Everything we do in the data discovery is in-house. there is no pinging, there is no contacting of outside APIs, there's no Google Translate, there is no deep learning translate. Everything that you get with the data discovery is within your system, and you have the full control over it, and you don't need to worry that it might have been exposed to third parties.
Yeah, and I may add that in terms of the architecture, we of course designed it with privacy in mind, and no personal data, even if you use Data Privacy Manager in the cloud, no personal data ever leaves your infrastructure. It never goes to our cloud. So I think this is one of the unique things about our solution. Also, another thing worthy mentioning is that combined with the other modules of Data Privacy Manager, it gives you much more value than you know, a regular data discovery solution would give you. So I think in a nutshell, that would cover it. All right, so I think with this we can end. And I had on my screen, let me just share it again, a link to a QR code to download our ebook. Our ebook describes, you know, everything about the challenges. It describes how we solve the challenges, what Data Privacy Manager can do. It speaks about the value of data discovery and classification. And I think it's an interesting reading. And of course, feel free to contact us. We are always open to new business. We are always open to new partnerships. And yeah, we are, like Anna Maria said, laser focused on data protection and privacy management. And any questions you have in that area, any capabilities you need in that area, feel free to contact us and we'll always try to help you. So thank you very much for being on the webinar. Come again, we are going to have a lot of the webinars on different topics in the times to come, and I hope we will all be in contact, and we will see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your attention and for being here. I hope to see you again, where we'll have more in-depth presentation of different features of our product, and also hopefully more updates on the data discovery. Bye, everyone.